All right, I know I said that there wouldn't be any videos for November because this is kind of my catch-up month to make sure that I get like a really good solid set of videos done for December and January throughout so that there's a pretty consistent schedule. But for this day, I thought it would be appropriate to come out with a video. Today, if you don't know, is Godzilla Day, or is the anniversary of Godzilla, so to speak, of 1954's Gojira. It came out in November 3rd in Japan today, so today marks the 70th anniversary of Godzilla, which, if not a lot of people know or have seen this channel, is featured prominently throughout. Godzilla for me is a series that is very special to me, so I thought today would be a nice opportunity to kind of work through my story and just some of my favorite moments in the series, just little bits and pieces here and there, just me talking about Godzilla for its 70th anniversary. I mean, it's amazing to see a franchise go on for this long. Of course, it gets a bit hazy. I know Godzilla won like a world record, or set the Guinness World Record for the longest franchise in history. But it gets a bit hazy if you include other things such as King Kong, for example, which came out before. Maybe even some of the Universal monsters. It gets a bit hazy there. However, for me as a kid, growing up, I wasn't very much into movies or video games that much, which is interesting because this channel is what I love talking about. I love talking about video games. I love talking about movies. When I was a kid, I really didn't care a whole lot, to be honest. If there was a movie that I was interested in, it was most likely going to be a Godzilla film or maybe even a Thomas flick on VHS. There wasn't a whole lot of times where I remember distinctly getting excited for, a movie or a game. I played Twisted Metal 2 on the PlayStation 1 as a kid, and that's it. That's as far as my video game knowledge really went. And when it comes to movies, same thing. It wasn't until about 2003, 2004 when Godzilla Final Wars was coming out. This is the very first time I remember being excited for a movie necessarily. Like the build-up, the hype for it. I remember very distinctly this was going to be Godzilla's last film. My dad made it very clear to me this was going to be the big 50th anniversary of the franchise. It was amazing. 2003. 2004 rolls around, and I think that's when it came to America finally on DVD through Sony Pictures. And I remember we had to special pre-order it, and it was something that I had looked forward to forever. When I was a kid, I really didn't have an allowance necessarily. I would mostly just be like good or do well in school, for example, and then usually my parents would get me something if I wanted it really bad. So I had been good for quite a while, and my dad was like, well, do you want to go get it like a new Hot Wheels set or a new train, or we could go grab that new Godzilla film finally. And, me being excited, I was like, yeah, let's go grab the Godzilla film. And I remember that was on constant repeat in our house over and over and over again. And it's kind of been one of those movies, too, Final Wars for me, where it was so amazing as a kid, because as a kid, you want to see the Godzilla scenes. So a lot of the other ones that had more talky necessarily in their story compared to Godzilla scenes, I really didn't enjoy that much when I was a kid. As I got older, though, I began to appreciate more the stories and less so the monster scenes. So Final Wars, when I was a kid, was like the most amazing Godzilla film. Even Godzilla's Revenge, which a lot of people don't like. You gotta remember, even though I was just a kid, I didn't know it was a clip show that was meant to save money necessarily for the franchise. I just thought, hey, it's a movie with like 9 Godzilla fights. He fights Gabra. It's amazing. Same thing for Final Wars. Yeah, sure, the final fights were like 10 to 15 seconds long, but I mean, they were cool. And then he fights Kaiser Ghidorah at the end. I really wish I was there for Godzilla's celebration this year with their like Comic-Con. I've been seeing all these reactions to Final Wars in the theater. Really, really amazing just to see that. I hope I'm there next year. If so, look for me. I just always have appreciated this franchise. It's one that's very special to me because I'm always going to welcome new fans to the fan base, but it's nice to know that it's a franchise that I have stuck around with for the longest time. It's a franchise that, I don't remember watching it for the first time. I don't have that story of, me popping in a Godzilla tape and remembering, the first experience. I just don't have that. There's a lot of different stories that I don't have, like when it comes to Star Wars, Godzilla, Thomas, the Tank Engine. It's just been there for the longest time, and you know, it's just something that has always continually been there. Of course, if you were part of the franchise fan base in the early 2000s, that was one of the hardest times to be a Godzilla fan, because nowadays, when it comes to being a Godzilla fan, it's easier than ever. It's amazing. There's news of a new movie coming out almost every year. You've got constant movies coming out, whether it be from Japan or from the MonsterVerse, or even if they announce something for Netflix, like one of their anime shows. It's really cool to see just how much Godzilla has come, especially with it being more popular than ever. And I love that. 70 years, and it's still going strong. It's not a franchise that people are kind of like, you know, it's still a franchise that gets people excited when one's announced. It still gets people being like a little kid at the end of the day. To be a part of the Godzilla franchise in that early 2000s, that was the hardest time to be a fan, though. Because there was no information coming out about a brand new Godzilla film. When Final Wars came out and Toho was like, this is going to be the last for quite a while, they were right. 10 years to wait for a brand new Godzilla film when Warner Brothers came out with their 2014 Godzilla movie by Gareth Edwards. That was a long stretch of time to go without a Godzilla film. But it's awesome because since 2014, we've only had to wait for maybe 3 years at the most. So, I mean, I've been appreciative that it's a franchise that is still going strong and it's still doing great numbers. I know for -1, when that came out, I was blown away by how well it did in the theaters. Because coming from the standpoint of Shin Godzilla, where that was a limited theatrical release, you know, it was 1 week, then they extended it, obviously, because it did very well, but it was more so one of those things that not a lot of people knew about. Not a lot of people even know Shin Godzilla is one of the movies in the Godzilla franchise, as in terms of like it came out. It just wasn't talked about as much when it comes to outside Godzilla fans, if that makes any sense. It didn't really make waves, I guess. So to see -1 be the highest grossing Japanese Godzilla film, and just seeing the talk around it, how people were praising it, the average moviegoer was talking about it. I went to the theater almost 4 times for it, I want to say. I went when there was the limited, you could see it like 3 or 4 days earlier than most people. I went to an IMAX screening of it. It was packed full of Godzilla fans. It was one of the best theatrical experiences I've had in a long time because everyone was quiet. Everyone was cheering at the right moments. You could hear a pin drop when people were talking. You could feel people were on the edge of their seats. I mean, it was amazing. And then once that final credit rolled and, you know, the Godzilla music is triumphant, everyone was smiling, you know. People were cheering and clapping. I mean, it was amazing. And I'm appreciative, too, that we get to see both sides of Godzilla. -1 is arguably one of the best in the series, if not the best, when it comes to the Japanese movies. It just blew off the doors of anything that a Godzilla movie has done before, as in terms of story-wise. As far as the narrative goes, I think that is still one of the strongest. I'm still not going to come out with a retrospective on it for quite a while because I want it to really be worked over in my mind to really think, is it going to stay in my top 5 or is it going to stay in my top 10? Because other ones like Shin Godzilla or even the 2014 movie or King of the Monsters, yeah, sure, when I'm watching it for the first time, it's easy, like 5 out of, you know, in my 5th place or my 10th spot. But then over time, they start to dwindle a little bit compared to the older Godzilla flicks that I love so much. So -1 just might not get one for a while from me, just because I want it to really mold over in my mind and for me to really think about it more and more. Same thing for Godzilla X Kong. Godzilla X Kong, I love to death because it was so in line with the Showa movies. I was with a lot of people where coming out of -1 and then all of a sudden we get a trailer for Godzilla X Kong and the graphics just weren't really good, in my opinion. The way Godzilla ran, while I wasn't like yelling at the rooftops of like, oh, Godzilla running, that's weird. If you've been a part of this franchise, you know that's the least weirdest thing that he's done. But I mean, coming off of -1, I just thought Godzilla X Kong wouldn't even have a chance to be good, in my opinion. I was wrong, however. Godzilla X Kong is one of the best and most funnest experiences I've had with one of my friends in the theater. Me and him, we were laughing the whole time at the movie. We were just having a blast because right from the beginning, I knew it was going to be in line with one of the Showa movies where, Godzilla's punching people finally. You got Kong with his mechanical arm. I hope they turn him more into Mechanic Kong over time. That would be kind of funny. But, I've always kind of appreciated how Godzilla can be serious, Godzilla can be goofy. I've always appreciated the goofier side of Godzilla more than the serious side. But I just am grateful that now we can get the best of both worlds. Japan can come out with the more serious Godzilla movies if they wanted to, and America, we can get goofier with it over time. Let's have Mechanicon, let's have Biollante, let's have a Titanosaurus. Let's get really weird in the Godzilla monster space. I'm just always going to be grateful for this franchise, and I know that's maybe a little weird to say. I usually don't get emotional when it comes to movies or like memories of movies or really like talking about movies, I guess. There's really no, like, I don't get emotional necessarily. Godzilla has just been there for me when you have your bad days, I guess, is always a good example. I know for me when I was a kid, anytime I was having a bad day, I'd just pop in a Godzilla tape and it would make me instantly feel better. Maybe one of my memories that I have very distinctly was my cousins visited me. And I don't really get to see my cousins that often when I was a kid. And when they were leaving, I was pretty upset. I was crying a little bit. And, to make me feel better, I popped in Terror of Mechagodzilla. And instantly I was feeling better, So Godzilla has just always been there for me. Even when I'm sick, I'll pop in a Godzilla flick. And I'm instantly in a better mood. I'm instantly a little more joyous, I guess is the term. I think I'm just grateful that this franchise has stuck around. It's not something that has been forgotten about. It's not something that it's just myself that can appreciate. I love that the fan base is bigger than ever now. I love that people are constantly talking about the series and what it means to them. Obviously, we've gotten some bad takes over the time, but I mean, I'm floored that Godzilla has been more popular than ever now. And that means the world to me because it means I'm not really alone in this. For a franchise that I got made fun of as a kid from time to time for liking so much, it's honestly really gratifying to know that there's others like us out there. There's others that grew up watching Godzilla, that had those memories of sharing their Godzilla tapes with their father, or maybe their mom doesn't really get it, but I mean, she'll even watch the Godzilla movies from time to time. Godzilla for me is my favorite franchise of all time, and it is nowhere going anywhere anytime soon. For me, I'm just as excited for that new one that they just announced. They announced the MonsterVerse film. I think that's coming out in 2027 or 26, so a little bit of a ways away. But they just announced the -1 sequel, or whatever it's gonna be. For the future of this franchise, I'm very excited to see where they're gonna go because it's the highest grossing Japanese Godzilla film, the highest grossing monster film. They can pump a little more time and effort into them now. I just think that we're not prepared for what the future of Godzilla gives us. And it's so cool to see all the collaborations that have been going on for Godzilla Day. There's been keyboards, there's been different shirts. I mean, in the early 2000s, that was not a thing for us Godzilla fans. You would have to go to Toys R Us in a section in the back, and it would be maybe like 2 or 3 toys. That was it. To see now that Godzilla in Walmart stores or just right there on the shelf, it's not like you gotta go search it out necessarily. It's amazing to see that. And I'm so grateful that kids nowadays have that opportunity. I didn't when I was a kid. It was very rare when I'd get a Godzilla toy. It was something that my dad would have to like special order, or he would have to like search out and find, and that's not the case anymore. I guess I would like to talk about some of my favorite Godzilla movies because in my retrospective series that I have going on, I've only done 3 of them, I believe. I've done Godzilla vs. Biollante, Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 sequel to 2014, as well as Shin Godzilla. Those are the ones that I've done my retrospective series on it, covering the history of those movies and covering, what audience thought of them, what I thought of them when they first came out, and what I think of them now. If I want to choose my favorite Godzilla movie of all time, it would have to be Biollante. Godzilla vs. Biollante is one of the most underrated Godzilla films. No one really talks about it. That's one where the story is so strong in it, where if you took Godzilla out and just had a random kaiju in it, it would still be just as strong of a movie. Having Godzilla in it just makes it an easy 10 out of 10 now. If I had to choose my second favorite, it would have to be -1 in a running up for number one. Just the amount of love and attention that was in that Godzilla movie is still mind-boggling to me. You could tell that the director was a fan of Godzilla growing up. Everything that I wanted to see in a Godzilla movie since I was a kid was in that movie. I wanted to see a really strong story done once again. Because if I'm being honest, the American MonsterVerse movies don't really have that strong of stories. I mean, it gets the job done, and that's fine because, you know, we're there for the monster stuff. But I mean, I would still like to see a strong story at the end of the day. So to see a strong story done where you were on the edge of your seat, even for the human portions, was so incredible to see. And to top it off, you got to see Godzilla scenes that were never shown, ever. Like the boat chase sequence. I mean, that I still get chills watching that, even though I'm not in a theater anymore. The musical score when Godzilla's theme in the it's used with the military once again. I mean, I always get the dumbest smile on my face when it comes to that. Seeing how Japan has really embraced the American side of Godzilla, where his fire breath now charges from his tail to his head, like how it was started in 2014, but this time, you know, his spines are shooting out and extruding. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm still floored at the budget of that movie, with its visual effects, how they look so realistic and good. I mean, -1 is easily... I don't want to say it's my favorite Godzilla movie yet, because Biollante I still have a lot of good nostalgia over, but I love that movie to death. -1 was easily my dream Godzilla movie. Some of my other favorites are Space Godzilla and Destroyer. Watching those two back to back all the time when I was a kid, because I had this DVD combo pack. And, you know, Space Godzilla was awesome because it was kind of Godzilla was fighting a foe that was could really stand toe-to-toe with Godzilla. Also, I was always in love with little Godzilla as a kid. I thought he was like the cutest thing in the world. And I was so mad anytime that like Space Godzilla trapped him. I would always get super mad at that. Destroyer, I mean, it's Destroyer. If you haven't watched Godzilla vs. Destroyer, I mean, it's easily one of the strongest story-wise and monster fight-wise. It's a violent Godzilla movie, too, where Godzilla really, really beats the crap out of Destroyer at the end of the movie. But it was always one of the best because it starts off with Godzilla right in the beginning. It was something as a kid where you didn't have to wait for Godzilla necessarily. Also, Burning Godzilla, his design was so cool. Godzilla's Revenge for me, I know, is a movie that a lot of people hate, a lot of people don't like, especially the Americanized version of it. But I will always have nostalgia over that movie because, yeah, sure, at the end of the day, it's a clip show with the only fight being Gabra that's like the new one. But, I mean, I still enjoyed it. It's the one that's on Monster Island. I always enjoyed the flicks that are always on Monster Island, like Son of Godzilla or Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Ones that are taking place on an island. I always like those jungle-esque Godzilla movies. So those three are always going to be in my top 10. Son of Godzilla, Godzilla's Revenge, and the Sea Monster, because those were always the fun ones for me as a kid. Godzilla shows up multiple times throughout those movies, and they're funny, they're entertaining, and I will always love those ones. I think if I want to be very specific too, it was Terror of Mechagodzilla that I liked for a long time there too. Terror of Mechagodzilla for a lot of people isn't as strong as the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, mostly because they take out King Caesar, and it's kind of one of those first times where it was like an actual sequel to the last movie. And I don't know, it seems like a lot of people don't like Terror of Mechagodzilla, but Terror of Mechagodzilla for me was always one of the strongest because Titanosaurus was always one of my favorite monsters, so when I got to play as Titanosaurus in Godzilla Unleashed, that was super fun as a kid, but I've always loved that one as well too. Godzilla for me is just always going to be one of the most special things to me, as in terms of how it stayed with me for so long. I just wanted to talk about Godzilla a little bit today because, I mean, it's the 70th anniversary, like I said. It's Godzilla Day. I'd be a fool if I didn't come out with a video, basically. But I just wanted to talk about it for a little bit because it's special to me. It's the favorite franchise of all time for me. Obviously, my favorite movie of all time is Speed Racer, but Godzilla's right behind Speed Racer as in terms of how special the franchise is to me. I will still always be like a little kid anytime they announce a new movie or there's a new movie coming out. I will not be able to sleep that night until I see it. I remember from -1, for Shin Godzilla, for Godzilla X Kong, for Godzilla King of the Monsters. Uh, Even if I don't really like the movie that much, I mean, there's still things I will enjoy about that. It's still the worst Godzilla movie for me is maybe a 5 out of 10. It depends, obviously. I still think the anime stuff is not really the strongest, and the 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters is not really a good movie, in my opinion, especially with how they do Godzilla's scenes and just how you can't really see what's going on. The camera's too shaky. It's too many quick cuts. I don't really like that. But Godzilla has stayed with me for 20 plus years. Like I said, I can't pinpoint an exact time that I became a Godzilla fan. It's always been there for me as a kid. I have those stories where I broke VHS tapes because I would watch them over and over and rewind them over and over again. I've got those memories of my dad and my uncle one time. I was at a Dave & Buster's and I saw a Godzilla toy there for, so many odd tickets. And it's almost a 20-plus-year-old figure, but I still have that exact figure because my uncle and my dad won it for me. It's a very special figure to me. That's something that I will always keep on hand. And I'm going to be collecting Godzilla for forever now. It's something that will never escape me. I just always love hearing what other people think about the franchise and their stories of how they came into it. Obviously, since -1, there's been kind of this weird push into what Godzilla is and what he shouldn't be. And it's a franchise that I just don't agree that there is an exact way of how Godzilla should be handled. Everyone's got their own interpretation, their own take. Some people like the more serious Godzilla movies like 1954 or Godzilla -1. Other people, like myself, prefer the more goofy Godzilla movies like that we saw out of Godzilla vs. Gigan or Godzilla vs. Megalon. I mean, Godzilla has been goofy from the very start, if you want my opinion. Godzilla has been serious since the very start. There's really no way as to how Godzilla should be portrayed, in my opinion. You can have him be goofy, you can have him be serious. There's been times when Godzilla talked. There's been times when Godzilla flew on his tail. There's been times when Godzilla flew by shooting fire in Godzilla vs. Hedorah. There's no one way that Godzilla should be interpreted. I think if I want to say something about the future of this franchise, I just hope that they can really get on track of doing more Godzilla movies, and it looks like they're doing that with announcing the director of -1 coming back. That production is greenlit finally again. The MonsterVerse immediately announcing a sequel after the opening weekend of Godzilla X Kong. So I don't think we're going to be waiting that long anymore for Godzilla movies, which is really nice to hear. Living in America, I hope a lot more stuff can come to America. Maybe some of those Godzilla stores can be easily set up more around America. The card game, I hope, could really come to America in a special way. Seeing that One Piece's card game has been really taking off in America. Same thing for Lorcana. I hope that Godzilla could get a card game. I would easily actually learn how to play that card game. I know they've been doing collaborations like Magic the Gathering got some Godzilla cards, which was really cool to see. I just think it's so cool to see just how far Godzilla has come in his 70 years. I mean, honestly, like it's really special and it's really cool to see that. Honestly, I just thought I'd take a minute or 30 minutes to talk about what Godzilla means to me and why it means so much to me. I'll always be grateful to my dad and my mom for showing me these movies. It's something that we as a family has always kind of bonded over anytime there's a new one or maybe we're watching an old one. I'm sure everyone else has their own stories, and I would love to see those in the comments possibly. But for me, Godzilla is always going to remain as my favorite franchise of all time. I don't care if I'm a 50-year-old man when I get to see the 100th anniversary of Godzilla. To see Godzilla go from its 50th anniversary to its 55th anniversary to its 60th anniversary to its 65th anniversary to now its 70th anniversary, I'm stoked that I'm going to be able to see its 100th anniversary one day, and I hope that's the case. But in the meantime, thank you, Toho, for this legendary franchise, honestly. Thank you to all the directors, thank you to all the actors, thank you to anyone who has been part of a Godzilla production. Godzilla means so much to me. I'll appreciate that forever. So, I guess with that being said, happy 70 years to Godzilla, the greatest franchise of them all, and long live the king.